So I am going to read you guys a list, and just talk amongst one another, and I just want you to figure out what do you think this list has in common, okay? So I'm going to read you this list, and again, talk amongst one another and see what you think this list has in common. Wars, violence, and global conflict, natural disasters, starving people, government, poverty, injustice, sickness, disease, and death. It's a happy list. That's what it's a happy list. But go ahead, chat amongst one another. What do you think this list has in common? Go ahead and talk to each other about it. All right, let's reel it all back in. So what do you think this list has in common? What do you guys think? They're all normal things, okay? Anyone else? Suffering, okay. What else? They all what? They all connect, okay. Repeat of history, okay. Anyone else? Because these are all great. Inevitable, okay. You can't control them, okay. Good. And so there's one thing that I wanted to share with you, and all those things are great. All those things are great. But this is what I wanted to share with you guys, what I think about the list as well. So you can go ahead and you can see this on the screen, is that these are all issues that we think are far more important for God to deal with than what's happening in our lives. These are all issues that we think are far more important for God to deal with than what's happening in our lives. Simply put this way, have you ever thought this? Well, come on, it's just a little thing. Like, why should I go to God and pray to God about that? When there's like starving people, there's wars, there's all these other things that are going on. Why should I bring like my little issues to God when I'm struggling and when I'm wrestling? I mean, why should I bring up passing a test when there's people starving in Africa? You know, or why should I pray about finding my keys when there's still fighting happening in Gaza? Like, we can go through like the list of just litany of things that sometimes we feel like what I'm dealing with compared to what the world's dealing with, I don't need to bring that to God. I don't need, it's just small in the grand scheme of things. And I think it's important for us to begin to recognize that, especially when you think about it this way. Because what we're going to look at today is a miracle that is in the Bible, but it's one of those things that are just like, that's really considered a miracle, and that's really in there? And I'll talk about why in a minute. Because also, when you look at the grand scheme of things, of what the Bible covers, I mean, we're talking about like the creation of man, we're talking about Noah and the ark, the founding of Israel, the fall of Israel, the rising again of Israel. We're talking about the life, the birth, the life, the death, and the resurrection of our Savior. We're talking about the foundation of the church. Like, all of this is talked about in the Bible, and yet this one miracle is in there, and you're like, huh? Like, why would this be in there? And so we're doing a series right now where what we're doing is we're just kind of walking through the life of a guy named Elisha. And what we're looking at in his life is just these instances of people that either he shares some things or he's come across the lives of others and have done some things and encouraged them. And there's some messages that we could take from Elisha as we look at his life. And remember that Elisha had a predecessor named Elijah. And for the sake of this series, whenever I refer to Elijah, I'm just going to call him Eli, so that we don't get Eli and Elisha confused with one another. Like, Ken, which one are you talking about? Also, it makes it easier for me because there's a lot of Jah. So it makes it easier for me in that way as well. But in this series, here's what we're looking at. I'm calling it a new power for a new season. And the challenge is this, because my dream is that when we hit this point in 2027, that that's weird, right? I'm saying 2027. I feel old. I remember thinking as a kid, like, and it's 2000, I'll be 31. Like, it's crazy to think, wow. So, okay, I digress. But that when we reach this point in 2027, that we would have seen growth and development happen in our lives. But in order for that to happen, there are some decisions that we need to make right now. So over the course of this series, we've been exploring some of those decisions. And if you've missed any of these series, you can go to our website, and you can just watch the replay of the messages as well. So you can be encouraged with those. But here's the thing that is important, because in each one of these, we're looking at some point in 2026, and we're going to come face to face with issues or challenges, and we're going to have to make some decisions with those and how we're going to react and how we're going to respond. And so the way that we respond will determine the depth of our relationship with God, the connection that we have with him, and it will also determine that when we arrive at this point in 2027, will we be different? Will we be different? Will we have grown? Will we see ourselves move forward in our relationship with him as well? So last week, I ended the message talking about prayer. And that really does set up what we're going to be looking at today, because one of the things that I want you to understand is what is the role, and that's what we're going to look at, what is the role of prayer in our lives? As we examine what we're going to be looking at today, what is the role of prayer in our lives? Why is this so significant? Why do we need it? And like I said today, this message that we're going to be, or this passage we're looking at, this miracle that we're going to be looking at, really does reveal how important prayer is today. And and here's the thing with this miracle: the miracle that we're going to read about is not the blind seeing, is not the deaf hearing, is not the mute speaking, is not the dead rising. You know, again, when we think about miracle, this is not on the list of, like, on the grand scheme of things, like, wow, that's a miracle. And on the grand scheme of things, like, why would that be included in the Bible? Like, why does that story matter? And you can tell I'm kind of doing that. I'm kind of teasing it out because I'm hoping you're asking, what miracle is it, Ken? Come on, get to the point, buddy. That kind of thing. You know what I'm doing? I'm doing those when the answer's about to be revealed, and then all of a sudden, like, the commercial comes on. Yeah, so I'm kind of drawing out the tension here, and hopefully you're able to recognize that as well. And before I get to the miracle, again, I wanted to remind you that I was listening to a bunch of messages, and I came across a series by a church called Life Church, pastors Craig Rochelle. And this series was really inspired by that. And so there would be some messages that were inspired by the series. Some of them are me kind of branching out on my own, because I felt like with the series that they did, it was great, but it didn't really cover the span of Elisha's life, of Elisha's life. And so I wanted to kind of jump into some things a little bit more that we can learn about him. And this is one of those things that wasn't covered that I thought, oh my gosh, this is so powerful if we're able to recognize this as well. Now, for those of you who don't know who Elisha is, so there's this guy named Eli, and Eli was a prophet. And so Elisha is just plowing in his field, and Eli comes along and basically picks Elisha to be his apprentice. And eventually, Eli goes into heaven, and then Elisha takes over the ministry of Eli. But again, in this miracle, or in this example, this is one of those stories that you think, why include that? So let's go ahead and dive right in. 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. One day the group of prophets came to Elisha and told him, as you can see, this place where we meet with you is too small. Let's go down to the Jordan River where there are plenty of logs. There we can build a new place for us to meet. All right, he told them, go ahead. Now again, here's the thing that's really interesting about this, because here's what I really want to get at today, is I really want us to understand why it's so important for us to understand the value of prayer, and that no matter how big our issue is, no matter how grandiose it might be, or no matter how minute it might be, that we can bring it before God and talk to him about whatever it is that we're going through, whatever our struggle is, whatever it is that we're dealing with. And so I just want to kind of give us a little bit of background to kind of set this place up, because this is really interesting. Talking about Eli, Elisha's predecessor, there was this one point where, and I may have shared the story over the course of this series, probably share it again, but there's this one point where Eli had gotten this threat. He was frustrated. He was done, and so he ran away. He was ready to die. He was ready to give up. He's like, I just want to die. And then this angel comes and ministers to him, and then he gets to this place, and he has this encounter with God. And God asks him, like, Eli, what are you doing here? And over the course of that conversation, here's what he says to God. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 10, Elijah replied, I have zealously served the Lord Almighty. But the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Now they're trying to kill me too. So Eli's like, I'm it. I'm the one. And I'm just done. I'm just done. Which is really interesting to me because you would think, like, if you really are the last one, wouldn't you think you push all the more forward so that you could really be that spokesperson for God? Because that's what we would encourage everyone to do, right? And that's what we would think you should do. Like, come on, press forward, buddy. You're the one. You're the. And he was like, I'm out. I'm done. Which is really, really interesting because then look at what God says in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 18. Yet I will reserve 7,000 in Israel who have never bowed down to Baal or kissed him. Simply put, there's a sequel. He wasn't the last one. God had a plan. God had a plan. So now we fast forward, right? We fast forward to Elisha, and there's so many prophets that are with him that they're like, this space is enough. It's not enough for all of us. So we don't know how many were there, but obviously God continued to build and grow and to develop what it was he was going to do. But here's my point, and this is so important for us to understand when it comes to prayer, because we can struggle with the same thing that Eli struggled with. And that's simply this, and you can see this right on the screen. Your prayer is driven by your perspective. Your prayer is driven by your perspective. However you see God, however you see your situation, however you see your problem, however you see yourself, your prayer is driven by your perspective. And your perspective will drive your faith or it can kill your faith. It all depends on the way that I look at God and the way that I see him, again, the way that I see my circumstance, or again, maybe even the way that I see myself. But your perspective is key. It really is key. So again, Eli's hopeless. Eli thinks it's done. And God's like, bruh, I got you. There's 7,000 that I'm developing. I got this. So we can look at our situation and think, God, you're not there, or God, you don't care, or God, you're not at work. When what we can see in Eli's situation, that he was at work behind the scenes, and Eli had no idea about it. So your perspective really makes a difference. And now when it comes to your prayer makes a big difference. See, because here's the point, and this is what I want you to understand, that when we begin to say things like, I don't need to bring this before God. I mean, it's just a small thing. Then what we're doing is we are making some theological assumptions that do impact our relationship with God, and we may not even realize is what we think. We may not even realize that's what we believe, but what it does is it impacts the depth of the relationship that we can have with him, and it impacts the depth of our faith as well. So if my perspective is, God, you don't really care, because that's what we're, without realizing it, that's what we're really saying. Is, God, you care about this. You care about these big things. You care about those huge moments. And I praise God. I praise you that you care about that. But this little thing, why would you care about this? And without realizing it, we're kind of communicating that he doesn't. So that's why it's important for us to begin to examine, what do I think about what it is that I believe, because it makes a big difference. When I was writing this sermon on Tuesday, I was at Katie Geisert Library. Is that how you, Geisert, right? Okay. I had to check my references there to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. But I was in the library working on, and there was this window that was next to me, and it was like a sliver. It's about the width of this cajon, but it was a sliver of window next to me, and I'm working on a sermon, and I just actually wrote that point about God cares about the small things. He really does. And so as I'm thinking about this, I kind of like leaned back Because that's what I'll do sometimes when I'm writing my sermons, is I'll write a certain thing, and I'll lean back, and I'll think about it, and I'll kind of reflect on it. And so I kind of did that, and I kind of turned, not kind of, I turned, and I looked at the little sliver of window, and just kind of looked out the window, just happenstance. And as I'm looking out the window, in the distance, I see this tree, and the tree's kind of like just blossoming in the wind. You know, that kind of, and it was such a gentle breeze that if you weren't looking for it, which I really wasn't, but just because I happened to be looking out the window, I think the size of the window made me focus on the things that are outside the window, and I just happened to see that. And then also, as I'm watching, there's a finch, those little small birds, a finch flies by, and then it flies by again, and then it flies by again. Things I hadn't noticed before, and the thing that's really, I don't know if it was one finch or several finches, because they all look alike to me, but they're all flying back and forth kind of thing. And then also I kind of looked out, and there was these bushes, and there was these flowers that were on the bushes, and I was kind of looking at those. And then I happened to look at the distance, and there's this woman walking in the background. She's walking from one building to another, and she has on really dark clothes. And I just happened to notice she had this really bright sky blue bag. I mean, it just really stood out against everything that she was carrying. So what happened is, as I'm looking out the window, I'm starting to notice like all the little things that are out there that honestly, normally I wouldn't see. And I think sometimes that's the same thing that we honestly, without realizing it, when we think, God, you care about this, but really what the statement is that we're making without realizing it is we're saying, God, my problems are so small, do you really see them? Do you really see them? And so I think it's important for us to understand that just that thought alone can really rock our faith. And just that thought alone can really hinder our ability to be able to trust him. Because here's the reality, and it's important for you to understand too. If I can't trust God with the small, can I really trust him with the big? Honestly, can I really? And that's the theological problem when we think I can only bring to God my small stuff. I love what it says in Matthew chapter 10, verses 29 through 31. It says, what is the price of 2 sparrows? 1 copper coin? But not a single sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it. And the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. So God notices, and it's important for us to understand this too. And I've kind of mentioned this before, and I'll probably mention it again, but it's important for us to realize that the same God that created the Grand Canyon is also the same God that created the hydrogen molecule. And the same God that created the oceans that cover the earth is also, or hydrogen atom, I should say. But the same God that created, the oceans that cover the earth is also the same God that created the water molecule. And also realize this too, that God has to govern the large as well as the small. Because if one small change happens, it could be catastrophic to mankind. So he has to monitor that too. So again, if God cares about the small things on our earth, then of course he cares about the small things in your life. Or, let me take this back. He cares about what you may consider small, but it's actually really large to you. But you may think it's small to him. He cares about it. It goes on to say in 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 3 through 5, please come with us, someone suggested. I will, he said. So he went with them. When they arrived at the Jordan, they began cutting down trees. But as one of them was cutting a tree, his axe head fell into the river. Oh, sir, he cried. It was a borrowed axe. It was a borrowed axe. So I love, there are certain things in this passage that I really love. The first thing that I love is that no one was standing behind the axe. Right? Because that's important. I mean, could you imagine you're swinging? And I wonder how the axe came off. Was it boom, boom, kind of thing? Or was it like mid-swing as he's coming around, he's getting that centripetal force? Look at that. Look at me using big words. But as he's getting that force going, as he comes around, does it fly off the handle then? I don't know. And he said the axe is borrowed. So I wonder, like, if he went to a guy and he was like, hey, man, we're going to be cutting down some trees. Can I borrow your axe? And the guy's like, sure, you can borrow my axe, but don't take my good one. Take the other axe here. And then he takes whatever. I wonder if that, I don't know. But as we're looking at this, I think about these things. But here's the thing that really stands out to me that I love this. The first statement that the prophets asked Elisha is they said, please come with us. Please come with us. Now that is really significant. Because here's the other thing. If I say that God doesn't really care about the small things in my life, also what I'm communicating then is he's not with me. That God is only with me in the big stuff. He's only with me when I have bills to pay. He's only with me when I have sickness. He's only with me, but he's not with me in the small stuff. That's what we're communicating. When we think, well, I can't bring this to God. It's just a small thing. Then we're assuming that God's not with us in the small things. So when God says, I am with you, guess what that means? Thank you. It means he's with us. So when God says, I am with you, it means he's with us. He's with you. So remind yourself of that, because that really is the truth of this as well. And then also, here's the thing too. When we assume that God is only in the grandiose, then we also begin to think that only the grandiose proves that God is real. Only the big things prove that God is real. So God, when you heal my sickness, you're real. God, when that check comes through, you're real. God, and whatever, God, when the fighting in our marriage works out and I've been praying for it, you're real. God, when my kids get their act together, you're definitely real. You're real. And so we tend to only look at the large things of life to prove that God is present. But going back to Eli, there's this one point where Eli, when he was waiting for God to show up, the Bible says that there was a great earthquake, there was a great wind, there was a great fire, and God was not present in any of them. But it says that there was a small, gentle breeze. And Eli covered his head and walked outside because he knew that God was present. That God can prove himself just as much in the small as he can in the large and the grandiose. So it's important for us to realize that. Because I think sometimes, because we're not looking at the way that God's working in the small, then what it does is it hinders us from being able to recognize again that he's with us. And that whatever it is that we're going through, that he cares about that. And I love the passage that every hair on your head is numbered. Like he knows that. He knows the number of hairs on my head. And he knows how easier it is to get to count day by day the number of hairs that are on my head. But he knows. Why? Because he cares about the small things. So he cares about you and what it is that you're going through and whatever it is that you are facing. 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, it goes on. And the prophet asked, well, where did it fall? The man of God asked. When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it into the water at that spot. Then the axe head floated to the surface. Grab it, Elisha said. And the man reached out and grabbed it. Which, I don't know how this miracle worked. Because this is a miracle. This is a miracle. Again, he takes a stick. I don't know. He takes a stick and just throws it in the water. And the metal axe head floats to the top of the water. I don't know. People, scientifically, how does that work? I don't know. I'll be honest with you. But maybe that's why it's called a miracle. Right? But now, again, look at this on the grand scheme of things. This is not the blind seeing. This is not the lame walking. This is a guy who borrowed an axe that flew into the river. And the miracle is done where the axe head floats up, and now the guy's able to grab it. Such an insignificant little miracle. It really is. So why is it in there? Because again, God cares about the small. Have you ever read those passages? You know, you're reading through the Bible, and then all of a sudden you read name, 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 name I can't say, name I can't say, name. And you're going through, and you're like, what are these names? And then what do? Skip the names, right? You go to the passage. Why are those names in there? They have no significance, at least to us. Why are those names in there? Because they count. Every name counts. And when we look at it in significance to the story of the Bible and what's happening in the Bible, in the grand scheme of things, this little person, in our minds, this little person, this little name that we have no connection to, whose name is there, seems like that person has no bearing on the entirety of the story of the Scripture, yet God puts their name there. Why? Because they matter. Because you matter. And no matter how small it is that you're going through, no matter how small the problem is, let me use some proper English there. No matter how small the problem it is that you're going through, Jesus, take the wheel. No matter how small the problem is that you're going through, he cares. And he is there with you in that just as much as he is with you in anything else. And we have to remind ourselves of that truth. Because here's the thing as well, and this is really important too. You know what happens? When we begin to think, God, I can depend on you, and I'll bring the big stuff to you. But I don't bring the small stuff. So you know what tends to happen? You know what we do? We handle the small stuff. I'm not bringing this to God, so God, I'm just going to handle the small stuff. I'll do the small stuff. So God, you don't have to worry about it. I got this. And then you know what happens when we do that, right? Our small stuff suddenly becomes what? Big stuff. When I should have just brought it to him in the first place. So what happens is this mindset can breed an independence where we no longer rely on God for every aspect of our lives. God, I only rely on you for big. And then here's a question. What determines if something's big or not? What determines that? How big does it have to be before you go before God and say, God, okay, now I guess I can place this into your hands? How big does it have to be? So why not just place it all into his hands? Now, I also want to make this really clear. Placing it all into his hands does not mean we become lazy. Because I've also seen people do that. Well, just give it to the Lord. Did you apply for jobs? No, I just gave it to Jesus. Well, bruh, right? So there's still parts where we still need to do an act. But here's what it means to give it to him. It means that God, again, I will just go out and I'll do whatever the what may be. But God, you handle the wins and the whys. And I trust that. And maybe you even handle the wheres. But God, I trust that, and I trust you, and I trust you in this. Here's the other thing, too, that's really important, too, when it comes to only praying about the big stuff, is we also begin to misunderstand what prayer is. And then what prayer becomes, When we only pray about the big stuff, but what happens is prayer becomes a life preserver. God, this is so bad that, now I need you. Now I'm drowning. This is so bad. So God, I need you now. And then what happens is we only come to God when life is so bad and we absolutely need him. This is important when it comes to this understanding of prayer. And you can see this right on the screen. Prayer is about connection, not manipulation. That's what I said last week as well. Prayer is about connection, not manipulation. Prayer is not a tool for me to use, for me to get God to do what I want him to do. It's not. It's not. I mean, think about it. Just think about your conversations that you have with people. How many people would you hang out with if they only came to you when they wanted something? Think about that. Would you hang out with them? Eventually be like, left on red. No, you just want something. That's not what prayer is. And prayer is not the coin that I stick in my biblical vending machine and I pull the switch and I expect God to work and God to move. That's not prayer. And so what we consider prayer many times really is just manipulation. You know what prayer is? I'll give you an example of prayer. So this week, we had, I worked on my sermon on Tuesday. I came to the church after to work on some things. And as I'm walking into the church, the people that work in the preschool came running out to me, and they said, Pastor Ken, there's something wrong with the house that's connected to the church. And they take me around back, and I look, and literally there is water coming underneath the door of the youth room, like water. And I can hear this in the youth room. I'm talking about like, and this wasn't like a drip, drip, drip. This was like Niagara Falls. So I run. I walk into the youth room. There's water in the bathroom. There's water in the front room. There's water in the kitchen, and then there's a little room in the back. I step into the room in the back, and I see, and it looked like someone left the sprinkler on in that room. It was crazy. So I see that, and so I step in because for I guess some reason years ago they installed like a water treatment little thing in there. And so I look, and water is like coming out of the lid of that. So I look at it, and I see like looks like there's an off button. So I go over, there's a handle on it. So in the meantime, I'm getting shh. I look like Flashdance. So I'm getting shh on me, and so I turn the switch, and I turn it to off, and it's still shh. So eventually I'm able to find like the water main line, and I'm able to turn that off. And then I'm walking around, and I kid you not, I am wet from shoulder to, sloshing and everything. So I go and I start to clean up, and so then I run to Ganal Furniture, or Ganal Lumber, and I get there, and they have like a water squeegee that will help me be able to clean it up faster, but it has no pole. It needs a pole. So I go to the front, and I ask the cashier, hey, I have this. And then it's so funny, when I walk to the front, she's like, you wet. What she said to me. I go, yeah. And she goes, so that's the reason why you need that? I go, yeah. And I said, but there's no pole. So she goes on, and she goes on her, the PA system. This water pushy thing, that's how she described it. This water pushy thing has no pole. Where do we go? Where do we find a pole at? And all of a sudden, over the intercom, it goes, aisle 42. So I walk over to aisle 42, and sure enough, eventually I find a pole, and I bring it back to the church, put it together, and start pushing the water. But here's what prayer is like. So when I get back to the church, the first thing I do is I pick up my phone, and I text Heidi. Heidi, I'm going to be late tonight. There's tons of water that's in the youth room. And I'm going to have to clean this up. That's prayer. That's prayer. That's the same thing that prayer is. Prayer is like when you pick up your phone and you text your best friend. And you're not even looking for solutions. You just want to share with your best friend what's going on, what you're facing, what you're dealing with, what you're going through. And her response, I love her response, oh no. You know, an emoji. But it's just, that's what prayer is. Prayer is connection. It's connection. And so when I understand that, then I can bring, it doesn't matter the level or the depth of the problem. I'm just connecting. I'm just hanging out with him. And I'll tell you, like, you know, I'm pushing water, you know, kind of thing, and I'm going through, and I'm actually, and in the water, I'm actually joking with God, like, is this what it was like partying the Red Sea? You know, I'm having fun. And that's the thing about prayer, is prayer doesn't have to be serious. You can laugh with God. You can joke with God. You can be silly with God. You can, because that's what prayer is. Prayer, again, is you just hanging out with your friend. And so when you hang out with your friend, you bring the big stuff, the small stuff, you bring all the stuff, you just bring you. And again, sometimes when you hang out with your friend, you're not looking for a solution. You just want support, just presence. You just want them around. That's what prayer is. And that's why we bring it all to God. That's why we bring it all to him. Because it all matters to him. Because why? Because you matter to him. You matter to him. And so God cares about whatever it is that you're going through, so bring it all to him as well. So again, here at Encounter, one of the things that we've made a commitment to do is to allow the greatest call of Jesus to resonate in our lives. And he said this, love God, love others, love yourself. So what we do is, that's the core value of our church. It drives everything that we do. But also what we do is we bring that into every single one of our messages. Now, I'm going to give you some suggestions of commitments that you can make based upon what you've heard today. Now, you can use these or not. You can create your own commitments and everything as well. That's completely up to you. But for Love Up, I will bring my whole life to God, not just my biggest crises. I'll bring it all. For Loving Out and loving others, this is important. I will resist minimizing other people's struggle, even when they seem small compared to the world or my pain. Because don't we do that? Girl, come on. Get over it. Really? That's what you're upset about? Come on. You know, and we may not say it that way, but we're thinking it, right? But again, it all matters. And it's just a way for us to show love to others. And then love in. And this is key. I will stop shaming myself for needing God in ordinary moments. I will stop shaming myself for needing God in ordinary moments. God, I need you. I need you. And so, God, I'm just going to go all in. And so what all in means is all in. Because, God, I just want to hang out with you. I just want to bring my presence, my challenges, my shortcomings. I just bring them all to you. Jesus, I thank you that you care.